This is the reading of the story, The Soul of Dr. Rooosha. The whimsical character from Fair Science is back, and this time he's soul-searching. Perhaps you've heard about Dr. Raymond Rooosha before, in the story Fair Science, a short story of a weird, crazy, but brilliant scientist who invited 3 children into his mansion and into his mind. That's this Dr. Rooosha. So much can be said about him. The man's brain came up with amazing ideas. However strange, funny, downright goofy he was, there is still no denying his unique brilliance, wisdom, and sincerity. Although he had a certain amount of intelligence, he was able to share what he knew in a down-to-earth way with people around him. It was those people, those he surrounded himself with and hung out with, that grounded him. They made his dreams become reality. Sometimes it took years for people to get on the same page. Other times, they could see and understand what he wanted to happen and knew the rest of the world wasn't ready to buy into his next great thing. When I say buy into, I don't mean that the doctor was doing late-night infomercials trying to convince people of a product that they just couldn't live without. Dr. Rooosha hated those and couldn't believe that people had forgotten our basic needs of food, water, shelter, and love. So many products invented, or as some claimed created, were interesting and captivating but lacked the ability to meet an actual need. Then again, the windshield wipers on the sunglasses? Dr. Rooosha ordered a crate load of those. He had to see them for himself to believe it. This is a story about one very special day that went into evening when Dr. Rooosha called for a meeting. Everyone from his dog walker and dishwasher to his attorney and CPA found a seat at a variety of weird but very comfortable shaped chairs around a huge table. And he began. Suppose we look at our 5 senses and combine them. He began to randomly assign people. Mark, you be the eyes. Judy, the ears. John, the nose, because yours is, well, it is rather, small compared to some. They all chuckled as the doctor went on. And I will be the mouth. All the better to speak to you with, my dear. His youngest advisor, Tony, said, what about touch? Oh, yes, Tony, you're so touching. Thank you. How handy. Tony, will you be touchy today? Touchy Tony. Yes, and Tony, represent touch? The doctor didn't wait for an answer. He just assumed Tony would play the part. Let's all grab our hands in a circle and sing Kumbaya, my lord. La 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 la. He tuned up his voice. No one was sure if he was serious. The room grew silent again. Then he continued. Now, with all of those senses, we still, as humans, have more sense and senses. His dishwasher yelled out, a sense of humor! Good, Rooosha replied. And he waited. His head housekeeper spoke with a beautiful, strong Spanish accent as she exclaimed, a taste of touch, a sense of taste, like the taste and what kind of shoes I want to wear today. Dr. Rooosha loved her accent, replied, did you choose your shoes, high heels or flats? What choice? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. What shoes are on your feet today, Maria? They all smiled. She smiled as well, then clarified, not shoes, shoes, like you wear on your feet. Shh. Oh, yes. Everyone listen, Dr. Rooosha whispered. Then he shouted, Yay, Maria, you hit the nail on the head! The toenail, I guess. Well, what I'm trying to say is Maria just kicked a field goal. Our 6 cents add up to our 6th sense. Our ability to choose, choice, our will, our soul, or how would you say our, I don't know what. Those are just, there are more than just 5 senses, you know. I'd like for us to examine and explore all of our senses. We all sense things other than just from our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our fingertips. We all have a certain guide and sense that comes from the inside out. Our conscience, our soul. Tony spoke up. Our guts. Judy asked, You want us to invent a soul? Rooosha smiled. Judy, you can't reinvent the wheel. We all have a wheel soul that is already working. I'm asking, how can we enhance what we already really, or should I say really, have? Dr. Rooosha leaned forward and touched his hands to his toes, folding himself in half, then rose up slowly, stretching his hands toward the ceiling. He took a deep breath and lowered them to his side again, then said, Here's a hint. Think of the hamster on his exercise wheel. He goes on that thing for fun, and because it's there. He or she doesn't go on it just to exercise in order to lose weight so the other hamsters will stop calling him fatty. He patted his tummy, then continued, If we can find a way for people to jump into their soul and use it, it could bring great enhancement to our personal relationships and even peace to the whole world. Maria? Dr. Rooosha called out. She rose to her feet. He asked, Do shoes have a soul? Ha ha, he laughed. Maria smiled and came back just as witty. See, yes, and it has eyes and a tongue, and of course its heels too. It heals too? He said back with a grin. Dr. Roosha's very presence brought great joy. He carried around with him something that seemed to lack in other people. The man shined, and although misunderstood by those with no sense of humor, he was still, nevertheless, respected by the greatest scientists, philosophers, teachers, leaders, and let's not forget, all children loved his quirky and mysterious ways. After all, he did invent the basketball that had nitro in it instead of air. That thing would bounce so high and fast you could grab it and nearly float to the basket. He mixed chemical compounds and made them into extraordinary and useful functions and features that added spice to life. On this day, Rooosha wanted to do more than evaluate how various elements react with each other. Today, he desired to explore how to come in contact with your soul. He was about to try various antics. Some seemed silly, others were so simple that even a child was able to grasp it. His mission today was to point out how even little kids know right from wrong and are able to make decisions, life decisions, based on something from deep within. He got his friends, many who were also employees, to take note of all their differences and yet what they all had in common. a sense somewhere buried down inside them, their soul. There were about 30 of them gathered today. Everyone was eager to participate. Some of them, who were normally quiet, were ready to speak up, and some, who usually talk too much, were ready to listen. As I write about this, I will try to include everything that happened and all that was said, but I'm honestly not sure I can capture here how awesome, fun, and informative this day was. As you read it, maybe you'll discover something about yourself, too. Here are a few of the things he did that day to stimulate and encourage his closest friends to look at their hearts a little deeper. First, he pulled a deck of cards out of his pocket. He rifled or fanned through the cards, showing everyone that it looked just like a regular deck of cards. He asked Mark, the one he asked to be the eyes, to watch closely and tap Judy, the ears, when he thinks the deck should stop. Judy, you then tap me, the mouth, when to yell, "Stop!" Those were his final instructions. They did so, and then he had Tony, representing touch, take out the card Dr. Rooosha stopped at. He had them all look at it, but not show him. Dr. Rooosha smiled and said, "Okay, Tony, put it back in the deck where you took it from." After Tony obliged, the doctor laid down the deck of cards and made a few laps around the table where they were sitting. He began by slowly walking and picked up speed until he was running as fast as he could. They were becoming a little dizzy, but kept their eyes on him to make sure he didn't fool them. He finally stopped, tapped the person closest to him on the head, yelling, "Duck!" It was Tony, and he responded by literally ducking. They never knew when to take Dr. Rooosha seriously, literally or not. The doctor smiled, then tapped John. "Goose!" Rooosha ran as if John would give chase, but he didn't. Dr. Rooosha gained his composure and said, "Thank you for not chasing me, John." John smiled a bit, then said with a smirk, "Yep, no problem." After a few years of knowing Dr. Rooosha, when working for him and with him, John knew he didn't always have to play along. Rooosha returned to the head of the table, caught his breath, saying, "Walking around, all of you, trying to read your minds is very, very hard. I thought that the faster I moved, the faster I would think, and maybe to gather your collective thoughts." "You were thinking about the card you saw, weren't you?" Maria said. "I was still thinking of choose." Jill, a girl who worked in the kitchen, said, "Now I'm thinking of the game Duck, Duck, Goose." Mr. Miff, the head butler, reminded everyone, "John is it!" Dr. Rooosha looked at him silly, yet usually restrained old friend, and said, "Miff, you'll always be my silly old goose." Rooosha was still catching his breath, letting out a whew. How will I ever guess what that card was? He scratched his head and suggested, "Let's all take a drink from the cup in front of us. A toast to all of us." He raised his cup, and they all did the same. One by one, they began to notice that on the bottom of every cup there was something written, including Rooosha's cup. They all read, "The King of Hearts," the very card that was picked. "Ha ha! Do it again!" cheered several of them. "Okay, but this time let's make it appear a little more interesting." He flipped through the cards again. This time he fanned John with them. John yelled, "Stop there!" "John, you are the nose," Dr. Rooosha reminded him. John replied, "No, now I'm the goose." John made the nasally sound of a goose. "Honk, stop there!" They all laughed, especially Rooosha, as he tried to speak. "You have been practicing, huh?" Rooosha then said, "Okay, Jill, give Tony a hand and pull out a card from where I stopped." She did so and showed everyone as Rooosha turned his back. He loved hearing their amusement. "Okay, donkey!" John yelled. "Goose nose!" "Yes, sorry, John Nose. Put it back in the deck." Rooosha reached for a piece of fruit the kitchen staff had placed on the table. He asked, "Mr. Miff, did you inspect all the fruit that was put out today?" Miff took his job very seriously and replied, "Of course, sire. It is all from our all-natural garden. Only the best," confirmed Rooosha, as he held one of the oranges up to the light and eyeballed it. "Mark, you're the eyes. Check this out." The doctor tossed it to him. Mark examined it. "Yep, looks good." Rooosha held up a hand, gesturing Mark to toss it back. Then asked them all to grab an orange and slice theirs open. As they did, the room erupted with their amazement. Every one of their oranges had a card inside. The King of Hearts. Rooosha flipped the top card in the original deck over. It, too, was the King of Hearts. He gave it a tap, picked up the whole deck, and rifled through it, showing now the whole deck was now all the King of Hearts. They all gasped as he said, "How could I go wrong in guessing it was the King of Hearts again, when the whole deck is the King of Hearts?" They were boggled because they saw the deck was not all the same King of Hearts just a few minutes ago. Rooosha took a slice of orange and bit into it as he explained. "This orange, yep, it was made to eat. You'd have a hard time using fruit and vegetables as a deck of cards. They are just not made for it. Although I guess it is possible." He paused to ponder that as he looked up to the right and then the left, as if he was checking both hemispheres of his brain. Tony said, "You could use them like poker chips." John wanted to remind Mark he owed him 50 peanuts from their last game. Dr. Rooosha continued, Yes, like we do when we literally play for peanuts." His eyes met John's eyes as they smirked, and both looked toward Mark, who was staring down at his orange, peeling off a wedge to eat. Rooosha decided to stay on topic. "So, as a good poker player, magician, never tells how they did their tricks. However, I'm not really a good magician. Now, how was I able to be sure the one you picked was always the King of Hearts?" Mr. Miff knew the answer, but waited. He wanted them to think about it. Jill naturally looked at Mr. Miff. She couldn't read his mind, but read his nonverbal cue. She suggested, "Is it the deck?" She blurted out the answer loud, paying no attention to the shy filter that normally kept her from sharing. Tony chimed in, "If the whole deck is King of Hearts, yeah, but..." Dr. Rooosha picked up the deck. Using his index finger and thumb, he fanned through them again. As they watched the riffle, they all blinked twice as they saw the deck had changed back to a normal deck with all the suits. Dr. Rooosha explained, because this deck, it's created special with all King of Hearts. How could you not pick the King of Hearts, right? Jill shouted again, shocking everyone there. It changed back again! Freaky, replied John. Tony asked, Dr. Rooosha, don't show us exactly how you knew we'd always pick the King of Hearts, or how in the world there was one in every orange, but, seriously, how is that even possible? Miff and Rooosha exchanged looks as the doctor said, Okay, I won't reveal the whole trick, but only this deck can do that trick. It's a special deck, made with the ability to fool you. It was created to do just that. You could even play a normal game of you couldn't even play a normal game of Go Fish with this deck. If I showed you how it is made, you would all see that it is not some type of a strange mystical ability I nor the cards have. If I showed you how to use this deck, you would all be able to do the same thing. With practice and a little help, added Mr. Miff. Rooosha smiled big, saying, Yep, I hope that this will drive home or deal out another point. Dr. Rooosha then began to deal out the cards as he asked, If all of us were just one of 52 cards, or if we only had one attribute, one trait or characteristic, like if we owned a diamond, John said, or 10, as he held up the card he got. Judy said, I got one spade. The gardening crew laughed. Rooosha welcomed their participation as he said, Yes, if you were all just defined by what you do or own or some label assigned to you, John added, I'd be the 10 of geeses? Tony said, I'd have 4 clovers. Rooosha was pleased that they were grasping this and confirmed, Yes, you are more and possess more than just some good luck charm or limited trait. Maria said, I am a queen. She smiled and her eyes met with Lafayette, who replied, You're more than a queen, Maria. Dr. Rooosha drove home the kicker. You see, you are all playing with a full deck. All of you. You all have qualities in you that are worth so much. Although we are all limited in some areas or another, we are all human. Within each of us, regardless of our skin color, our heritage, our race, our sex, our makeup, we are all still made up with one very common bond. We all have a soul. How can you and I be sure we have a soul, a spiritual side? Because we are human. Just as Dr. Paul Levi, a medical doctor that Dr. Rooosha had on his staff, was about to express his own strict religious belief, he heard Rooosha say, regardless of your regardless of your religion or religious upbringing, we all have a soul. We are not here to provide anyone with answers on what to do with that soul or tell each other what we personally believe is the proper responsibility of each human once we get in touch with our soul. I just want us to get in touch with it. If you feel, at some point or another, like sharing your personal belief, that's fine. Just don't insist that we conform to that same exact philosophy and shove it down our throats, or I promise will collectively throw up all over you. I'm sure that would not be the very response you were trying. I'm sure that would be the very response you're trying to avoid. I know that some of you believe we were created by God. Some of you believe we were formed from the sea. Some believe both God and evolution. We're not here to form a belief of what happened before we were created, or how we were created, or decide what we believe happens to us after we die, but to investigate, research, and discover what is inside us here and now. John thought about how Dr. Rooosha was the first Christian that he had worked for who didn't try to get him to accept Christ as his Savior. It was obvious that Dr. Rooosha believed Christ was real, and he tried to live as Jesus did, but he never pushed, forced, or tried to make John feel uncomfortable for expressing what he did not believe. He loved being around a strong man of faith who didn't try to strong-arm him and everyone around him who believed differently. Dr. Rooosha was accepting yet faithful to what he personally believed. As John was deep in thought, he heard Rooosha say, "My intentions are not to convert, convince, or condemn. I just want all of us to have a heart-to-heart discussion and go on a quest to seek, find, and show that side of us that is beyond our skin." He grabbed his face and pulled out his cheeks, then patted his belly again. Beyond this shell or earth suit is something more. You won't see it with your eyeballs, but you will see the true person by how they act. You cannot see spirits, just like you can't see the wind. You can see the effects of the wind, but you can't see the wind. You can't see someone's breath. You can smell it, but you cannot see it. Each of us, who we really are, comes from deep within. A tribe in Africa uses the term kidney. Another group in India called it the liver. We sometimes call it our hearts, a major organ. Mr. Miff spoke up. "I love you with all my kidney, Dr. Rooosha." He replied back, "And I love you with all my liver, Mr. Miff." John thought about how his liver hated liquor because of the damage he allowed it to cause years ago. There were several faiths and religions represented at the table. Some didn't believe anything in particular or just weren't sure. There was no denying that Dr. Ruth not only had heart, but he was truly a soul-searching individual. He loved when he saw someone with a deep passion for something. He was also well aware that some people, like the overzealous nuts who picketed out in front of his house, took it upon themselves to be the final judge and jury on any progress being made. Sadly, some people outside were so close-minded that they allowed no room for free will. He was well aware that many people let their minds control their soul rather than the other way around. Inside his home, on this night, at this table, Dr. Rooosha was pleased to be with friends who, although they had different convictions, theologies, and practices from one another, they all respected each other. They were free and encouraged to all practice their own faith without judging those who chose to believe differently or not believe at all. He exercised free choice, free will, and allowed room for those whose faith was even based on superstitions. He was confident in his own faith and belief in God and Creator, who was truly sovereign to accept all people who had not come to put their faith in him. He believed that God still believed in them regardless. Dr. Rooosha was convinced that it was God's job to reveal himself to others. Rooosha was a willing vessel, but didn't try to play the role of the saving source. He lived out what was revealed to him and let others decide for themselves. He knew that even if a person chose not to decide anything at all, they still had made a choice. Dr. Rooosha reiterated, nature is a wonderful thing, and it is natural for all of us to either look into exploring the condition of our soul or neglect doing it at all. Most of the time, not all, don't do it until they meet up with some type of a crisis or catastrophic situation. As you all know, I normally explore nature, but I'd like for all of you to help me explore things that come naturally to us. Let's look into common sense and discover, or at least unveil, some of the mysteries we haven't tapped into that are in us naturally. Some of you have already discovered a supernatural power outside of yourselves that helps you. Some believe that all that power comes from within yourselves, and others believe that there are several gods that aid all humans, while others believe there's no God, not even one, let alone several, and if there is, he or she doesn't care. Regardless of all that, again, which you can all seek on your own time, I want us to solely look at our insides, like a spiritual x-ray. The only way to see bones is with a physical x-ray machine. I want us to put on some type of spirit glasses, not sunglasses with the neat little windshield wipers, and see our spirit and the spirit of others. Then he sang a cheer and clapped his hands like a cheerleader. I got spirit, yes I do, I got spirit, how about you? A few sang it back in the same manner. He asked, what makes a full-grown man paint his face and belly with team colors and brave the freezing colds to cheer on his favorite football team? The same few called out, Team Spirit! Those who were not participating began to catch on that this time together, let alone every day working together, was a participation sport. He asked, what drives people to accomplish a task for the greater good? Everyone said, Team Spirit! He smiled at their vigor and joked a little. Okay, calm down. Don't get too excited. We don't want a mob mentality. Don't go starting a cult or something. There are too many of those already. As he spoke, he began to move around and stretch his legs. He thought, I bet they could all use some fresh air too. So he asked them, please, follow me out here. As he approached his huge floor-to-ceiling windows and opened the sliding glass door and stepped out. The balcony is very well built, right, Phil? His contractor assured him. It will hold all of us. Have some faith. They stepped out into the cold, fresh air that was balanced out perfectly with the warmth of the sun. As Dr. Rooosha said, if this mansion, let alone huge balcony, was built incorrectly or on sand, the foundation would collapse and we'd all be in danger. Then he shared a story about a Mr. John T. Hanson. He was a brilliant engineer and had figured out how to not only make a robot that functioned like a human, but rather than just a single small android, he built a monstrous, enormous amusement park that functioned much like a human being as possible. Perhaps you heard about the Forever Happy amusement park. Many had heard rumors, and a few had researched facts. Some didn't know the name of the guy, but they knew the name of the park. Dr. Rooosha went on. So, if you have not heard, Mr. Hansen's biggest challenge was that the park was not fully human, even though the way it functioned was very much like a human. It breathed, it could talk and reply. It was able to move connecting parts. However, it was still not human because it lacked a soul. He was able to reproduce everything but a heart or conscience. It was still just another man-made machine, an amazing high-tech one, but still just a machine, not a woman or man, not human. They all pondered for themselves for a few moments in silence, in silent thought. Then he broke the silence with, "Let's eat. More than fruit. We'll consider more after lunch, or flip the crab after we eat." As they moved back inside to eat, Jill, from the kitchen staff, asked Bill, the head chef, "What does he mean, flip the crab?" Bill reminded her how they cook the soft-shell crab. "Remember, I yell, 'Flip the crab!' when it's time to cook the other side?" "Yeah? Well, it's just an expression that we'll be cooking up the other side of the conversation later." Jill replied, "Oh," even though she still wasn't sure if she got it or not. As they ate, they not only shared food, they shared their hearts a little. Some things they discussed had nothing to do with the reason they gathered this day, to search for the human soul. However, they also discussed that main topic. Dr. Paul Levi was a devoted Jew, and Bill provided kosher meals for him and anyone else of the Jewish faith. There were a few Muslims who sometimes required an alternative meal as well. Others who were various degrees of vegetarians and people with restricted diets. Just as the food they took in was different, so also was their personal belief system. However, none of that mattered when it came to gaining more understanding of the human soul. Dr. Levi shared that he had heard of a scientist who weighed the human body after death and documented that there was a difference in weight. "It was lighter," Dr. Rooosha said. "Yes, I've heard studies on that as well." John asked, "So, you think our soul has some weight to it, and it leaves our body when we die?" Maria claimed, "Oh, I hope so." Mabel, better known as May, who worked in the flower garden, expressed her hopes. "I hope my soul weighs considerably less than I do, and if I get a new body, that it's thinner than I am now." John and Joan agreed with that for themselves. They all began to realize that there was so much they didn't know. Some had not given any thought to it before, while others were established in their faith of what happens to their soul when they die, while others were still developing a faith regarding their souls. Dr. Rooosha said, "I hope you all enjoy this today and consider not only what happens to the human soul when we die, but really focus on the here and now. Get in touch, grasp and grip your souls while you're alive." Tony expressed to Judy how fast the time goes while working here. He had only been on staff for a few months. Judy had worked for Dr. Rooosha for years, and she was still very happy. She said, "Time flies when you're having fun." Mark offered a corny joke. "You know what Kermit the Frog says, time's fun when you're having flies." Judy moaned at his humor. "Ugh, okay. Not while we're eating." Mark, not while we're eating, Mark. Mark nodded. "Okay, after." She rolled her eyes and moaned again as others began to awe at the lunch in front of them. After lunch. "Now, let's flip the crabs," said Bill. After they enjoyed a great lunch, Dr. Rooosha asked, "Are you all ready to do a few more things that may help all of us soul surf?" Tony asked. "You mean soul search?" "That too," replied the doctor, as he pulled a cotton ball out of one of his pockets, saying, "I want this cotton ball to represent a cobweb. The cobwebs we find in our minds and all over our spiritual life. We all look in the mirror and try to fix our hair, except Bill, because he wears a hat." Bill always wore a chef hat, but he was also bald. "We all try to make sure our outside looks okay, physically, but we don't always open up and check on the condition of our soul, what shape we are in spiritually." Bill realized he still had his chef's hat on, so he took it off, asking, "How does my hair look?" There was a great response. John, who would occasionally lightheartedly joke with Bill, said, "Glad you wear a hat to keep your hair out of the food you're cooking. I'm glad you took it off, too. No more hiding that big, beautiful, bald, naked truth." That brought on a lot of laughs, and even more laughs as Bill replied, "We all have skeletons in our closets. We all have dust and dirt in our spiritual lives. We try to clean things up and shave off the extra things that weigh us down, so we think we're cleaner. I'm bald, so that's one less thing I have to think about." Mark asked Dr. Rooosha if he could take a second to tell a quick joke. Dr. Rooosha knew he'd get his point across and welcomed all participation, even slight side trails off the main topic. "Let's hear it," encouraged Dr. Rooosha. Mark glanced at Judy. She smiled, and Mark stated, "Well, if a man is bald in the front, he's a good lover. And if a man is bald in the back of his head, he's a good thinker. But if he's completely bald all over, he just thinks he's a good lover." They all cheered as Rooosha said, "As long as Bill keeps cooking, being a good chef, I don't care how and what he thinks or how good of a lover he is." They all agreed. Rooosha also used this time to thank Bill and his staff, not only for the great lunch today, but for all their hard work all the time. He then went back to the inspirational illusions. Dr. Rooosha had no trouble getting back to the subject. "Bill shaves his outer head. It's as clean and smooth as can be. But inside our heads, we sometimes find cobwebs and confusion no one else can see. We can try to ignore them, but eventually we find that we need to knock down the cobwebs and make them disappear." I'm going to stop there for now, and we'll go on to part 2. In the description section below, you'll see a link if you're having trouble finding part 2, and a link to other things and stories. So on to part 2.